I had a brilliant opportunity to sit down with an Aboriginal psychologist. Now, the only reason that he became a psychologist is because he designed a program to help young Indigenous people thrive, and nobody would take him seriously until he got a formal qualification. And then when he went to get his degree in psychology, he realized that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were severely underrepresented in the field of psychology. So he's made it a little bit of a mission to rectify that. And the interesting thing is that almost all of us would agree that the way that society is right now isn't necessarily creating an environment where most of us can thrive. A lot of the ways that we're living our lives and a lot of the values that we hold as a society are eroding our mental health and well-being and disconnecting us from each other and nature and spirituality, everything that's important. And if Clinton, this guy that you're about to meet, can somehow bring the Aboriginal perspective into this Western field of psychology, and some of those values and some of that meaning can be reflected back onto society, I believe, and he definitely believes, that that would create a better world. So if you enjoy this discussion, if you take anything positive from it, please click the like button for us, leave your comments down below, and pass this on to other people, because that's the only way that this kind of stuff's going to get out. Nobody's typing into YouTube, how can Aboriginal perspectives mix with Western psychology to create a better society? So we really appreciate your help spreading this message far and wide. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Clinton. I'm a Gamilaroi man, so I'm Morba from northwest New South Wales, so around Tamworth and Gunnedah area. Our country spreads all the way up over the Queensland border and around St George and Goondiwindi. I've spent most of my life either here on the Gold Coast or up in the northern suburbs of Brisbane. Depending on which parent I was sort of spending time with at the time. I've been permanently here on the Goldie since I was 16, so yeah, quite a few years now. I'm a psychologist according to a piece of paper.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't necessarily...
Why did you get that degree in particular?
So I'd been working overseas. I was a chef a while back. Left school when I was 15 and did a chefing apprenticeship, and then I used that to sort of travel a whole bunch of Europe and work my way around. And while I was over there, I was very grateful for the opportunities that had created for me and the things that I was getting to experience and to see. And it made me think more about, I guess, the limited opportunities that are available for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, particularly outside of sport, really.
Yeah, right.
Unless you're a footy star as a kid, or another sport, a sprinter or something, then you really struggle to get a bit of a leg up, particularly 25 years ago when I was going through school. So I started looking at different programs and stuff, and doing some writing and developing stuff that I thought I could bring back and help kids in communities to, I guess, get a little bit of a leg up. And I hit up a few different organisations when I came back, and they basically all just said, this looks great, but what's your qualifications? I go, mate, I'm a chef. And they'd just go, well, what the fuck has that got to do with this program that you're showing us? And I'd go, oh, nothing, but I was one of these kids, and I think I can have a pretty good crack at helping others. And they said, well, that's all well and good, but come back to us when you've got a piece of paper saying you've got some form of qualification to do it. So that's what I did. I took myself off to uni and got a piece of paper.
Yeah. And that's really how you look at it, just like...
Pretty much.
So, like, getting the degree didn't change that much about what you were believing or, like, what you were going to do? Like, it's all the...
Nah, if anything, my uni degree, studying psychology, what I quickly realised after finishing that was that I needed to spend about the same amount of time again unlearning everything that I'd learned.
That's a huge, like, bold claim, and, like, really interesting, because I feel the same about the academic side of things. You're always reading studies that sort of contradict human nature. And
yeah, so I mean, going through my degree, there was when I went through, there was next to nothing even in the cross-cultural space, never mind Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander specific. And I very, very quickly figured out that a lot of the stuff that is Western norm based and based on very individualist and deficit, I guess, models or notions of health and well-being and healing just don't fit for a whole bunch of people.
So all those terms that you just used, in layman's terms, what are you talking about there for everyone watching?
So basically, you know, I guess psychology as a profession is based off a biopsychosocial model, and so it's supposed to consider the biologies to do with, I guess, mental health, mental well-being, along with the social influences, and then I guess the psychological processes, so your cognitions, memories, emotions, stuff like that. Which is great, but it's only done from a very limited perspective. So Australia as a nation is one of the most individualist nations on the planet. It's very me and now processing.
Yep.
You know, I come from, you know, an Aboriginal society, which is one of the most collectivist based societies on the planet. Mm-hmm. So completely different ends of the spectrum in terms of societal living, concepts, mapping, and where you see your position within that. So a lot of the stuff that I guess makes sense to people who are used to living in an imperialistic, capitalist, individualistic society, there's a whole bunch of psych stuff in there that may be of benefit to them. Yep. For people for whom that is so foreign, there's no words to describe it, none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where I sort of branched off, forked off from everyday, normal, run-of-the-mill psychology into, I guess, really being focused on establishing and practicing a more Aboriginal-based psychology.
Yeah. So how do you even begin that?
You know, I'm commonly telling people that you know,
because that's like you have to actually pull apart all these models and just before you can even think about starting again and like creating a new one, and everyone's going to challenge you.
Yeah, and I'm quite happy to be challenged.
Yeah.
It doesn't faze me at all. But when I'm speaking, you know, one of the very first things that I guess our ways of knowing and being our law is that you're responsible for what you know. So don't claim up what you don't know. And I only yarn about stuff that I know.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate enough to go to university and learn all that Western side. I've also been fortunate enough to spend a whole lot of time with a whole bunch of our traditional healers, spiritual healers, lawmen, in different parts of Australia, on different country, and so I get to know a whole bunch of other stuff. Mm. And so I've got a good basis to build off. Yeah. In terms of what I do, but I also, you know, had my own pretty rocky journey as a youth. Yeah. And I seen what didn't work. Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in a very abusive household, very low socioeconomic and very abusive household. I was very disconnected from, I guess, my dad's side of my family for a long time in my life. He took off when we were quite young. And so I had to face all those challenges of living in a very low socioeconomic suburb in an abusive household. So I faced a whole bunch of psychological and physical abuse when I was a kid, more than I'd wish upon anybody else, you know. Which probably led to a whole bunch of dramas for me as I got older.
Yeah, totally.
I was couch surfing from when I was 15 years old, and I was full-blown alcoholic, I reckon, by the time I was 15, 16. There's not many substances out there that I haven't played around with in my young adult life, and I've had multiple episodes in my life where I've been completely suicidal. Yep. So when you go through those lessons and you actually live through those, you get an opportunity to learn a thing or two. Yeah,
totally.
So a lot of the work that I do these days is, I guess, using a lot of my story and my journey and the things that have and haven't helped me, and helping people to just see if any of those are going to help them. I don't claim to be an expert on anybody else. I think that's one of the failures with Western forms of health and healing, be it psychology or medicine or anything else, is people with pieces of paper are constantly trying to position themselves as the expert of someone else, rather than realising the only expert in that room on that person is them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just need, you know, a little bit of guidance, a little bit of steering, a few choices thrown in front of them, and you know, sometimes a little bit of a helping hand to access opportunities and resources that can help them make better choices. So that's more, I guess, what I see as my role these days, is just a bit of a guide, really.
Yeah, I love that. That's like so in alignment with the kind of stuff that we're doing here.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, sick. So, there's all kinds of directions we could go from there. Thanks for coming, man.
No, that's fine. No worries at all. You know, I'm a true believer in people learn best out of other people's stories and journeys, you know. Like, there's only so much you can learn out of a book.
Yeah.
There's so much more you can actually learn from some human interaction and connection. So I think the more that we share our stories, and particularly the ways that, you know, we've got through some of the bendy stretches in those stories, the better it can help everybody. So.
Yeah. It's a bit hard to really share your story openly and vulnerably though in society as it is right now, because we do have that individualistic, everyone for himself kind of world.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I at times feel sorry for Western society. Like, there's always this pity that's put around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from the West. Whereas for me, I'm always flipping it. I'm going, man, we've got so many people in Australia that are so disconnected because we are so stuck on those individualist values. But people are too blind to even see that that's why they're sick.
Yeah.
Because they're so disconnected from family, from place, from any sense of spirituality, any notion of culture, and that's got to be a pretty lost feeling to have to live with every day.
Yeah.
So, you know, my healing journey's all been about rebuilding connections, and that's where my strength comes from. Is I'm extremely grounded in who I am, and that was probably the biggest turning point for me, was, you know, shifting from my mentality from, I guess, being the version of me that everybody else expected I'd turn out to be, to the version of me that I knew I could be, and not giving two fucks about anybody else's opinion on that journey.
Yeah, were there particular highlights or things that really helped, that, like different healing modalities perhaps? Yeah,
absolutely. You know, like, I've dead set learnt more about living from sitting and spending time in silence with ancient trees than I ever have out of a book or off another human being. You know, if I'm sitting with a 500-year-old tree, that tree's got so much more knowledge on just living than you're ever going to get from somebody, from a human being who's alive, you know. So just allowing myself to, learning how to, and then allowing myself to just get back to just being a part of what is nature, rather than seeing myself as anything different, has been really integral for me. I don't see myself any different to a bug, any different to a tree, any different to anything else on this beautiful planet. You know, everything plays its role and everything has its purpose. And I think sometimes as human beings, we can try and situate ourselves as more than. Again, further disconnecting ourselves from that keeps us alive, keeps us happy. You know, when you only look outside and you see these beautiful mountain ranges covered in trees out here, and if you're only looking at that and seeing pieces of furniture and phone books, rather than fucking beautiful trees, then yeah, you're going to struggle to find happiness. So that's what's been, you know, most integral for me, is just getting back to what we've always done as Aboriginal peoples. You know, we've had 100,000 years to figure out how to live on this place and how to do it well. And I think the more we can get back to that, not just as us as Aboriginal peoples, but everybody on the planet, the better it's going to be for everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is there much resistance in the Aboriginal communities to sharing and integrating the cultures?
I don't think there's not resistance. I think there's people that have learnt that they have to be protective.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because a lot of what we have shared over the years has either been used against us or stolen, and then claimed up and by somebody else who gets to go and make a whole bunch of money out of it. And
yeah, because there would be so many medicines, like natural plant medicines and stuff like that, heaps of families would know about, but that you can't really share it because, you know, all of a sudden a white man's going to put a patent on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of the leading, I guess, pharmaceuticals that are coming out now are based on plants that we've known about and been using forever.
Yeah.
And that is one of the stark, cold realities, is that when we do tend to share information, it gets stolen. Somebody whacks an IP on it, or somebody whacks a trademark on it, and next minute, the plants that were once there and that anybody had access to disappear. And
they're regulated, and you're not allowed to use them yourself when it's like these are your traditions.
Yeah, and it's the same with a lot of our, I guess, psychological healing processes. You know, we think about it more as spiritual healing rather than psychological healing. But even in that, you know, we've been practicing things like mindfulness and meditation and visualizations since the beginning of time. Now that they're fads, and you know, for a long time people had laugh at notions of that. Now these days, you know, the East has been given a whole bunch of credit for those things, but still, as Aboriginal peoples, nobody pays any attention to the fact that, hey, we were doing that for thousands of years before any other human beings were even in groups anywhere else in the world. So that's led us to, I guess, being protective at time of stuff.
Yeah.
Not out of a resistance, but out of a fear of it being used against us or being used in a negative way. A lot of what we've shared is used in a negative way rather than a positive way. You know, we come from a positive-based society. You know, the foundations of my ways of knowing and being are based around things like respect and responsibility and acceptance and connectedness and you know, understanding deep inner truth and working from that position. And yeah, that's not necessarily how the West works.
Yeah, no.
So sometimes when we talk about some of these things, people gobble them up and they manipulate them for their own, I guess, individualistic greed or desire, and tend to use them against people.
Yeah. What about going the other way, trying to, like with your psychology degree, trying to create a Western kind of lens for Aboriginal psychology, like when you're trying to write papers on Aboriginal psychology?
So that's very much, I guess, the perspective I work from. So, you know, I've spent a fair few years lecturing through different universities and lecturing in the space of Aboriginal health and Aboriginal wellbeing. And a lot of the time you go into those institutions and they don't want you to actually lecture Aboriginal health. They want you to lecture Aboriginal ill health and despair.
Yeah.
You know, all the negative stats.
That's the westernized way.
It's that whole deficit
Yeah.
thinking around health, whereas that's got nothing to do with us as Aboriginal peoples. That's all stuff that's happened because of what's happened.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly flipping things around and going, no, let's actually have a look at it from our perspective. And it's a much more holistic concept of being. You know, commonly people will term it social and emotional well-being. I'm not exactly a fan of the term social and emotional well-being because I think it confuses people.
Yeah.
Sometimes people think you just, I guess, it's become a fad term in Australia for Aboriginal mental health, unfortunately. When as Aboriginal peoples, when we're actually talking about, we're talking about holistic being, and mental health's just a little segment of that.
Yeah.
So again, it's one of those notions that we sort of started yarning about. Agencies and organisations grabbed a hold of it, and now they've made their own assumptions of what an Aboriginal understanding of this is, and then that's what they fund, that's what they produce all their policies and their programs, etc. around, and then they wonder why it doesn't work, because it actually doesn't map out against what we were ever talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, you know, education's a key to that, but that's us helping others become more educated. And that's where I see the resistance.
Yeah, so it's not so much, you're actually trying to infiltrate the way things are, like the Western thing, and implant Aboriginal like meaning and culture and everything into that, to heal that, so that then reflects back onto society.
Absolutely. You know, we can clearly see that in all the Western countries you've got these staggering both physical and mental health problems just rising every year. But this stubbornness to actually reflect on the driving causes of that. And it's the processes themselves. It's the individualism and the capitalism that actually is driving all that. Whole countries, whole societies of people that have become so insecure, feeling so inferior constantly, unless they have what the other has. You know, particularly our youth, I really get concerned sometimes for our youth. I think just year upon year they're becoming more materialistic and more attached to things, and feeling less about themselves when they don't have things, or judging themselves more when they don't meet the targets that others set for them.
Yeah, that's a big one.
You know, we do it to kids from a young age. We put the government pressures us to put kids into school at 5 years old and tricks us into believing that we'll get better education outcomes from it. We know it's a crock of shit. We know that, you know, some of the countries that have got the Scandinavian countries that have got the best education results in the world, they don't make their kids go till they're 8 or 9 years old. So we know that sending them to school early actually doesn't lead to better results. What it absolutely does lead to is more mental health problems. More judgment. You're putting kids in at a very young age into a position where they're judged against every other kid in their class. You'll learn this at the same time, you'll be able to do this and achieve this at the same time, and if you can't, we're going to give you a report card that suggests you're less than everybody else. And you get the ones that are able to hit those targets who get doted upon, you know, get the leg up, get rewarded because they're doing better, because it's actually a system of education that fits for their style of learning. Maybe that's 5% of the class. Everybody else is shut out. So, you know, as a nation, I think we do need to get back to looking at some Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and trying to incorporate that into what we do. And I think it'll benefit everybody, but there's just this sheer stubbornness. You know, it's this whole notion of white is right that just doesn't even allow people in positions of power to self-reflect. So they're constantly talking about what they think they know, which is generally fuck all. So for me, I think the most successful way to help people heal is to help them find a place of silence where they can truly listen to themselves. You know, a lot of, you know, it's funny, you know, you hear people yarn about all the time, making jokes like, that person's gone walkabout. You know, in mainstream society, you'll hear people make comments like that without them understanding that that's actually a purposeful process of, you know, going and finding that space of silence where you can actually start listening to this thing in here, and start figuring out what you need to actually do. And it's really hard, I think, particularly if you're living in urban areas, but even in rural and remote areas, there's so much noise all the time. Others, chitter-chattering, a lot of chitter-chatter that's then driven in your own head, all the noise that's around you, physical noise, that it can be really hard to just be able to stop and listen. And I don't think a lot of the time rehabilitation, the way that it's run, allows for that either. It's largely, you know, if you look at where any of the rehabilitation centres are here on the coast, they're in positions of noise. So you're not going to find your silence. And you know, from an Aboriginal perspective, it's about understanding that you know, the thing in here, spirit drives this thing up here, not the other way around. You know, if you're only feeding it, if it's only getting tainted negative energy, well then yeah, you're more likely to be getting some tainted negative thought processes happening, and then some probably tainted negative actions coming from those.
Tainted negative consequences, and the cycle continues.
Absolutely. So that place of silence is about being able to remove all that chaos and actually just get back to that place of listening to what's going on in here, rather than allowing this to control everything. Pumping some more positive energy in there. It's no different to, you know, if I try to just plug my phone into a generator to recharge it, you know, it's getting waves like this through a generator because it's not regulated. It's going to blow my phone up. You know, you plug it into your wall socket that's nice and generated, and that's getting a more pure sine wave energy through it, well then it doesn't blow up. It can actually figure out what it's got to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's what I'd like to see happen is rehab done in a more holistic way, and in environments that actually allow for and promote people to find their own silence.
Yeah.
And then their own direction and path.
What would that look like?
It's different for everybody. I don't think there is any.
So
there is no single on that.
You can't have a rehab facility where you put a bunch of addicts or alcoholics all together and...
I think you can, but I don't think you can drive them all through prescribed programs, because it's no different to the school model.
Yeah.
It's saying this is what's wrong with all of you, and this is what should fix all of you. It's no different to school, where we're saying this is what you will learn and you will do it by this stage, or you're lesser.
Yeah.
I think rehabilitation at times can set people up again to re-experience some of that judgment and that rejection that they've probably perceived all their lives and led them to addiction in the first place. Yeah. At the end of the day, addiction, it doesn't matter what sort of addiction it is, it's just a negative coping strategy. If we don't ever get back to looking at what's driving the negative coping, we just try and put a band-aid over the negative coping, then I don't think we truly ever heal.
Yeah.
I'm also not a fan of the whole alcoholic label or the drug addict label. You know, I think we very much become labels that people put upon us. You know, somebody tells you you're an alcoholic or you're a drug addict enough, well, you're probably going to start seeing yourself that way, rather than, hey, I'm a human being who's struggled through life for whatever reason and negatively coped. Removing yourself from being that, you know, you're Johnny or you're Jane or you're Mary or you're Jack, whatever, you're not alcoholic. Yeah, I'm just not a fan in labels, to be honest.
Yeah, me either. Even the various mental health labels, they're very unhelpful, and it's, you know, law of attraction sort of thing. That's what I think about. Like, if you're always saying, I am depressed, I am depressed, I am depressed. Most of the people that come to me and I'll say, hey, why are you here? And they go, I'm depressed. And I go, no, you're not. You're whatever your name is. Depression is something you're experiencing, but it's not you as a human being. I think if you allow it in and you attach yourself to it like that, yeah, you do become that. You become depressed. You take on that new label. That's your new identity. Rather than going, hey, that's something I'm experiencing for a reason. And there could be a whole bunch of reasons there. There could be some biological, could be a whole bunch of social, whole bunch of experience things. Different mix of those for everybody, but it's still not who you are. Quite often, you know, I'll have young ones that I'm working with who have unfortunately not found the right help at the right time, and they have got to that stage where they've become that label, and it becomes really damn hard to help break that then, because it's become part of an identity. And you know, the identity crises that they were probably having in the first place that led to them taking on that label and becoming that. It's going to be just as hard to break that and help them become, you know, back to their true selves. When did you decide to start your own brewing?
So I stopped drinking 5 years ago. as I said, I'd struggled with alcohol and drugs for freaking years, and you know, it was when I had kids, and one day my kids just turned around and said, "Dad, can you stop drinking silly drink?" And I just went, "Yeah, no worries," and haven't touched a drop since. Like, because my kids were more important than alcohol, than self-indulgence, and self-treatment. I was like, yeah, it was just a matter of flicking that switch and going, hey, what's more important to me? And once I did that, what I did find really quickly was I missed the flavour of beer, not the alcohol. I don't like soft drink.
Yep.
I don't like sweet, sugary drinks. I like a bitter drink. And what I quickly found was I could not get a decent non-alcoholic adult beverage freaking anywhere, particularly here on the Goldie. Like, worst place in the world to have tried and start a non-alcoholic drinks business is here on the Goldie.
Yeah, old mate just down there at the bottle-o laughed at me when I asked if they stocked you.
That's all they do. Most people here will ask me, is that a real thing? Or they'll say, we don't have a market for that. I'm like, well, you don't fucking know if you've got a market or not because you haven't given people an option.
Yeah.
They've removed the option. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to help create more options for people to be able to make their own choices around. Now, choices often we perceive our choices as being driven all the time, because we confuse choices with influence. It's one of the things I've had to figure out in my life is what's the difference between my choices and the influences that just exist constantly around me. And taking control of your choices is an empowering thing to be able to do. You know, if you go down there and you go down to the pub down the road and they say, hey, I've got no non-alcoholic drinks, you might perceive that that's my choice has been removed, I'll grab a beer. But you've always got the option to walk out.
Yep.
But you shouldn't fucking have to. You know, if you've gone down there to meet some mates, watch the footy, have lunch, what fucking ever, if they're all having their beers, then you should be able to fucking get one as well. That's non-alcoholic, or something that isn't freaking soft drink or ginger beer, or getting stung $5 or $6 for a glass of soda water with a piece of fucking lime in it. So that's what we're trying to do.
Because that feeling of having a golden beer on an Aussie summer day is the best feeling.
It is. It's a refreshing experience. We're just a little bit behind in Australia. Like, non-alcoholic beer is normal in Europe and getting more normal in America, and it's normal in a lot of Asian countries. It's just here in Australia we are so steadfast on attaching beer to alcohol and not being able to separate that. The mentality just hasn't been there to be able to go, one's a process and a flavour profile and one's a poison. And the poison may exist in there, but it actually doesn't have to. You can still have something that's been made through the same process and has a flavour profile that you can enjoy.
That's just the Aussie way though. We have to get fucked up, we have to get wasted, and it doesn't matter how, let's do it. It's just that, I think that's the thing that's getting in the way there.
And it's definitely changing. So, you know, there's a lot more. So a lot of baby boomers are not drinking just because they're fucking over it. They've drank all their lives and they've got to a point of going, I'm over it. But then there's a whole bunch of millennials that are just choosing not to drink.
I've seen a couple of those studies and stuff.
Which is a good shift to see. But again, they're faced with the same pressures of there not being any options to drink when they go out to a venue. So again, you're either stuck having soft drink, which is no fucking good for you. Or getting stung for $5 for a glass of bubbly water with a piece of lime in it. It's like we're not out trying to dictate to anybody that they shouldn't drink alcohol ever again, whatever. People can make their own choices in life, but fuck, we deserve to have options that we can base our own choices on. You know, there's a lot of people that for whatever reason at whatever time might be choosing not to drink. Got to drive, designated driver, sweet, I still feel like having a beer. You know, there's a whole bunch of women, pregnant women and breastfeeding women that again, you know, they can't consume any alcohol when they're pregnant or they're breastfeeding, but why should that shut them out from being able to enjoy a flavour?
Yeah.
People who are going through chemo or other medications or experiencing other illnesses, same thing. So yeah, we're just trying to create more options.
Yeah, love it.
And that's you know, and then, you know, if we can help influence some people's choices along the way, that's a great thing too.
Yeah. I've found giving up alcohol, one of the biggest obstacles is other people. Absolutely.
And particularly, I guess, in that Aussie mentality, you know, I used to get a lot of people who go, oh, fucking harden up, mate, just have a beer. And be like, actually, I am hardened up, that's why I'm choosing not to have the beer. Yeah, exactly. You know? I can maintain my own values and choices. You don't control them. Yeah. But yeah, it can be socially awkward at times. You know, I watched my friends group drop off like fucking flies when I stopped drinking. Clinton's no fun anymore. I'm just as fucking fun. I'll still dance around all night like an idiot. Yeah. I don't need to be pissed to do it. Yeah. Because I'm not socially insecure. And not having alcohol in your life, did you find you became successful quicker? And like, ironically, you ended up doing way more of the stuff that the individualized society wants you to do? I don't know. It became easier for me. Success is it's a very subjective measure. What one person might see as successful, another one might be seeing in another way. But what I absolutely did find is I had a whole much more time available to me to get shit done. Whatever that may be. Surfing with my kids on a Sunday morning rather than being hungover. Training, doing whatever, writing, whatever it is. I just had more time to be able to do it. So that was probably the biggest thing I got back from quitting drinking, was the wonder of time. I wasn't wasting time drinking, and I wasn't wasting time being hungover from drinking. It adds up quick. Yeah, absolutely. You know, there probably should have been a whole bunch of financial benefits, but I just decided to sink all that into sober instead. So yeah. You know, I think the most important thing for people to do if they are struggling with drugs or alcohol or any other form of addiction, is allow themselves the time and to put the effort into actually self-reflection. You know, blame and excuse are the enemy of healing. Because as long as I can use an excuse, or as long as I can blame somebody else, it means I don't fucking have to change anything, and so therefore I won't. As soon as you take back self-control, self-accountability, you're forced to take ownership of some shit. Yep. Which then allows you to self-reflect on it. And yeah, it can be fucking painful at times, and it can be hard, but it's so damn rewarding as well. And not reflecting on, I guess, the negative things that have happened in our life for the purpose of dwelling on the negative, but looking for the positive lessons that we can take out of that. You know, for me it was, you know, I used drugs and alcohol for that period of my life to really mask all the abuse I copped as a kid. And that would have continued, that pattern would have just continued on until I actually stopped blaming the abuse. Yep. I just went, fucking the abuse isn't putting the bottle in my hand. Yep. The abuse isn't putting the fucking hot plate in front of me. I'm doing that. And my path to freedom from that was simply self-reflecting on it. Go, what fucking positive can I take out of that? And it was simply, that felt shit. You know, and often people go, how the hell is that a positive lesson? I go, because I'm actually far better informed to know how to treat others. Yeah. Because I had the opportunity to learn what it feels like to be disrespected, to be rejected, to be abused. But I wasn't allowing myself to learn that lesson. Yeah. So hopefully my kids will be in a far better position than I was. I'll still fuck up, I'm far from perfect. But hopefully they'll be in a far better position than I was because I've allowed myself to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
So I think we can always find a positive in the shittest of circumstances if we allow ourselves to do it. And that doesn't mean agreeing with stuff that's happened. Sometimes it's just about being able to reflect, find a point of acceptance, and some positivity out of the worst of circumstances, so that we can allow ourselves to move forward and heal.
There were so many powerful moments in that discussion, and obviously if you're still here, you feel that way as well. So please let us know by clicking the like button or leaving a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and you can also support us by picking up some merch from our Teespring store or donating to us directly on Patreon. Thanks for watching.